Welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast with Michelle Chalfant, a place to delve into who we are, how we got that way, and explore what it takes to be a healthy grown-up. With an extensive toolbox and guests with varied expertise, Michelle will lead us on a journey to learn what it's like to live authentically and to love ourselves just the way we are. And now, here's Michelle.
Hello and happy New Year, everyone. Happy 2019. I am so happy to be in 2019. I'm thrilled to be done with 18. It was a lot of work for me. I love what I do, no doubt, but it was a lot of work, and I'm happy to be in 2019. And not only that, the holidays, it just seems like everything gets so hectic. Anytime after Halloween, it just gets crazier and busier and crazier and busier. So here we are. It's peaceful again in 2019. And for those of you that have been following along, and offering me beautiful suggestions about my little mini European tour, I'm back. We dropped our older son off in Barcelona for the semester, and it was my first time in Europe. And gosh, we had such a blast. We started out in Lisbon, Portugal, went over to Madrid and then Sevilla, and then ended up in Barcelona, as they say, for 5 days. It was my first time, and I am hooked. No doubt about it. And I'm very jealous of my son, who gets to live there for 4 months. I never did that in college. And I remember my Spanish teacher said, you really need to move over to Spain or Portugal for a semester. And because I loved speaking the language. And I didn't go because I had a boyfriend, which is absolutely crazy looking back on it. So we thoroughly encouraged our son to go, and he went, and I'm now jealous, but it was such a great trip. And I want to thank everybody for all the amazing suggestions that you made. We took them. I mean, we had great restaurant ideas from all of you and places to see. And gosh, it was just incredible. So thank you, everybody. Okay, lots of new beginnings for all of us. And for the Adult Chair, as you can tell, we have a little bit of an upgraded podcast, I should say. It was time to freshen it up a little bit. So we have a new intro. I've got a new website we just launched. Go check it out at theadultchair.com. And again, all that writing that I did in 18 is coming to you throughout, actually starting in the next couple of weeks. So make sure you're on my email list. You can join that at theadultchair.com, but also connect with me on social media. I'm on Instagram, and I am on Pinterest, and I am on Facebook, all the usuals I'm on. And especially, I love that Adult Chair closed group. So make sure you're in that. Okay. We also have a sponsor, and it's a company that I love. This is a vitamin and supplement company that takes the guessing game out of what to take. As you know, I am very, very much a believer in emotional health, but also physical health. I'm a very clean eater. What I put in my body has to be pure. And this company, honestly, it resonated so deeply with me. I am thrilled to have them on this show and to share this information with you. This company is called takecareof.com. It's hard to know what vitamins or supplements I know that we need to be taking. But this company has this really cool quiz. It only takes 5 minutes. You input your information and it kicks out this beautiful profile of what you need. Vitamins and supplements, both, which oh my gosh, so many people just take vitamins. Sometimes we need supplements, whether you're fatigued or whether you're stressed, whatever it is, it takes all of that into account and builds a beautiful profile for you. They have vegan and vegetarian options. And this is the other thing that I think is perfect, because with vitamins, we take them every day. And at the end of 30 days, guess what? You get it delivered right to your door, that next box of vitamins and supplements. It's a subscription service with this company, and it's perfect. So they really do build a vitamin routine that's made for you and your health goals. Check out that quiz. It's incredible. And guess what? You get 25% off your first order when you use the promo code ADULT. So go to takecareof.com and enter the promo code ADULT and get that 25% off. I'm telling you, you're going to love this company. All right, it's time to get to our first show of 2019, and we welcome an awesome guest, Terri Cole. Here we go. Let's get right to Terri, though. She's a fabulous guest. I'm very excited to have her on today. She is a New York-based licensed psychotherapist, a relationship expert, and the founder of Real Love Revolution, and the Boundary Bootcamp. And her 2 female empowerment courses reach women in over 25 countries. Welcome, Terri Cole.
Why, thank you, Michelle Chalfant.
I'm so happy to have you on, Terri. Thank you so much for joining us here.
Sure, me too.
And it's like the first week of the new year, so happy New Year.
And Happy New Year to you.
Thank you. So we're talking today with you about love, all about love. I want to touch on boundaries and empowerment. So we're going to make this the year of love. We're kicking this off with love. So tell me, because you are a relationship expert, your experience is quite impressive, I have to say. I know you've been on some television shows and consultants for different things and on Hay House Radio. So let us know about love, Terri.
Well, what do you want to know about love?
Gosh, how do we find love? How do we love ourselves? And I think I know what you're going to say about that, but enlighten us, please.
Well, when you say how do we find love, I think that's a really good place to start, which is basically looking within. Mm-hmm. That finding love has to do with yourself, and that you've got to find love within yourself before you can find it outside of yourself.
Yeah.
Because I think that a lot of times, we have this experience like, oh, it's out there, it's somewhere else.
Yeah.
And the reality is that it's not. It's actually in here. And that the only way to create, I like to say that the only path to real love is self-love. And that may not sound that exciting and it may not sound that sexy, but it's actually really true. Because what happens if you don't know yourself, which really comes before loving yourself, right? Because how can you love yourself if you're not even sure who you are or what you like or what your preferences are? Mm-hmm. So I think it all starts within, which I know is a lot of the work that you do as well.
Yeah. So from your perspective, what happens to us that we don't love ourselves? Like, how do we become adults? And you're so right. We look for other people outside of us to then feel complete, quote unquote. And it doesn't work. We get that high for how many months and then it fades away and then we're back living just with ourselves. But what happens to us, in your opinion, that we become adults and we don't really love ourselves?
Well, it's not something that they teach in school. Mm-hmm. It's not something that most of our parents, this was not a therapeutic time, at least when my parents were growing up. It wasn't very common. This whole explosion in the 60s and the 70s, for people who were already adults at that point, they sort of missed this whole self-love, self-empowerment, looking in thing that it became extremely popular. So what parents did the best that they could, but what did they teach us? They taught us to be good girls.
True.
To be nice girls.
Mm-hmm. And
a lot of times that really means being taught systematically to abandon yourself.
Yeah. I was just going to say, to even betray us or abandon. You're so right. Mm-hmm.
Without a doubt. Because when you have, the disease to please, right? Which is this is like a phrase that was coined by this amazing psychotherapist, or maybe she had a PhD, but anyway, she has now passed away, but she had a book called Curing the People-Pleasing Syndrome. Her name is Harriet Breaker. And it's something that, she wrote that book probably in 2001, and it's still incredibly relevant today, because having the disease to please, even these very high functioning people or my clients, or who make up the groups or the courses that I teach, they're getting it all done, but sort of at the expense of self and at the expense of real self-care. So how do we bring it back to, even though you didn't learn how to do this from your family of origin, the real question is, can you learn now? And if the answer is yes, how?
Great question.
Should I answer it?
Please do. Yes, please. Oh.
Well, of course, we're always evolving, right? Mm-hmm. So of course, it doesn't matter what you did and didn't learn, and whatever happened before this moment, you can, set your intention to learn everything there is about how to regard yourself in the same way that you would a 5-year-old child that you adore. It's like we save all of this juicy love for others or the kindness that we have for others. So much of the time we have this very, rough internal dialogue, the inner mean girl it's sometimes called, or punitive superego, depending on how you're looking at it. But there's a reality that most of the time, the way that we talk to ourselves, especially if we've made a mistake, we would never talk to a child that way if they made a mistake. Like, you're stupid, you're bad, what's wrong with you? You get what you deserve. Like, oh my God, the worst things in the world. So the real thing is awareness. That's always the first step. I talk about the 5 pillars of real love, and they're really all about you. So we start with self-awareness, which is understanding what is your relationship to yourself right now? Because the only way we can change anything is if you have clarity about what it is. And that really looks like, how do you treat yourself? What is your self-care like? Are you a total workaholic? Do you have that inner mean girl? Do you make yourself go until you drop? Do you overcommit? Do you overgive? Do you overfunction? Which I find that a lot of women in particular have a tendency to fall into those categories. And, there's a codependent element of this process as well. Now, because the women generally who are attracted to my work are very high functioning, I had to actually create a different word because they didn't identify with codependency, although what was happening and what they were talking about was codependency. But it wasn't like your Melody Beatty 1984 codependency, right? Codependent no more, or whatever.
Yeah.
So I coined a phrase, high functioning codependency, because this really astutely speaks to what my own problem was and what so many of the people in my tribe, so many of the women in my tribe have experienced this, which is that people would never look at you and think you're a codependent because you're a baller. You've got it all going on, right? You're managing everyone and all your life, and you've got a career and you're making money and all those things. And yet the end of the end is that if you're really the last one on your list when it comes to self-care, if you are prioritizing other people's needs above your own, just because you're highly functioning doesn't mean that you're not codependent, and that at the root of that is a desire to control outcomes, choices for other people, right? Stopping people from making mistakes, micromanaging people who work for you. It's really about, are you doing things that other people can and should be doing for themselves, right? When we think about like the basics of codependency, and why I bring this up around self-care is because I find that for a lot of people, it's a real block.
So true. 100% agree. Yeah, it is. I love that. High functioning codependent. I love that.
Why, thanks.
Yeah, I love it. So that's number 2. What's the number 3 pillar?
Well, actually, that is kind of a part of, I don't know, I just went the long way around the barn. I didn't even get to pillar 2 yet. So pillar 2 is self-knowledge, right? So self-awareness is pillar 1.
That's key for sure. You have to know what you're doing and what you're thinking and if you have the self-care. So agree with that for sure.
Exactly. So self-knowledge, which is really diving into what happened in your life. What really happened? We need some kind of a cohesive narrative around growing up. So with clients and in groups, I've created all these things called downloaded blueprints. And so it's basically answering and journaling a lot of questions about things from the past. So it's like I'm a GPS to guide people to the answers that will help them become liberated in this process. It isn't like I have the answers. Obviously I don't, but I am an excellent GPS to cut down the time that it would take someone to find, like it's all about a better question, right? So if you're answering a very astute question about yourself, about growing up, about middle school, about your past relationships, there's a whole bunch of things that we do in one of my love courses. Now that's real self-knowledge is starting to come into, and you're getting a different kind of a picture. And then we move into self-acceptance, right? Like, it's very easy. Denial, what do they say? It's not just a river in Egypt, right? Yeah. It's very easy to want to compartmentalize or to minimize or to just straight up deny, painful things that happened in the past. And yet if we don't ever unpack those things in a real way, because you're a psychotherapist too, that unresolved stuff, those injuries, they contain energy and they will drive decisions and behaviors. And so you don't want that, right? So we move into that self-acceptance, and without judgment, it's like, okay, this is what happened. This is what I experienced. This is how I felt. We don't have to make excuses for our parents. Listen, we're just going to make the, let's say, generous assumption that they just all did the best they could with what they had to work with, like
true. So true.
Because it doesn't, how long? I mean, there does have to be a point where you process your anger about it if there was a lot, abuse or neglect or whatever it is. But they're definitely, in the work that I do, I'm like, okay, we have to establish that early on and move into, because a lot of the women that I work with will feel guilty. Like, but I know that my mother had a rough life, and that's why I'm like, okay, great, but I don't care about your mother. Like, we're only talking about you. And so telling the truth doesn't mean that we're like crap talking our parents.
No. Right? It's not judging. It's just accepting what is or what was and moving on.
Exactly. And by denying, you're really, that resistance is the energy of staying stuck.
Yes.
Because it isn't true. Right. So if you're like, no, it wasn't that bad, but it was that bad, until you get to the point of like, okay, this happened and that was hard. And I was left alone at that age, or I was left to fend for myself in this situation. And this is how I felt about it. And it's allowing the child within you to, for a change, be front and center. Don't make that kid take care of your parents. Right. Just let her be like, hey man, I'm pissed. I'm hurt. I'm upset. That sucked. I really wish you hadn't done that. In that child within, having the freedom to just be like, okay, I'm glad someone's acknowledging that that was incorrect or that that hurt me. Then we can move into the fourth pillar, which is self-compassion. Instead of being so rough and so, we can be so punitive with ourselves. Having compassion, the same compassion, as I said in Pillar 1, that you would have for a child that you adore. Have compassion. Stop making excuses for other people. Just have compassion for whatever it is that you experienced in your life, and have more compassion on a daily basis for yourself. I find that the women that I work with the most are afraid if they have compassion, it's almost like they'll become lazy. They'll become complacent. They won't be getting it all done at the speed of light like they are now. And I'm like, you're really losing something by not having this compassionate relationship with yourself, because everyone else then gets all of this goodness from you. But for that goodness to be authentic, you have to also be giving it to you. So self-compassion is a really big one. And then we move into the last pillar, which, is called self-love, but there's like the self-category of self-celebration, which is different than self-love. Celebration is basically really like seeing what makes you uniquely you and like vibing on that, being excited about that, celebrating what makes you uniquely you, as opposed to so much of the time we've got the compare and despair thing happening, which just sucks. I mean, I don't know. There's not a better word I can think of right now, but it's just brutal,
Yeah. I think that we forget that we are unique and we are made uniquely, and we're supposed to be unique and not be like other people. But we do. We compare ourselves, which then takes away from loving ourselves because we think we should be like someone else.
Yeah, there's this great quote, and I can't remember who said it. It's not mine, but it's someone else's. But if anyone listening Googles it, they'll see that just says, "Comparison is the thief of joy."
Wow.
And you're like, wow, that is so true.
So true. And it goes back to, again, self-acceptance. Self-acceptance. We have to accept who we are with all of our bruises and childhoods and all of it. It's like, just accept who we are. We're meant to be whoever we are today. That's it. Period. End of story. You don't need to change anything. Don't be like someone else.
Right. And the uniqueness, it's like really grasping. I think something shifted for me in my early 20s when somebody said, DNA-wise, you are the only you that will ever be. in the history of planet Earth. Like there has never been another, and there never will be another with your exact DNA.
Wow. That's kind of mind blowing to think about that.
Right. Like you're like a Picasso, like you're an original, and it should be hopefully like you can definitely learn to embrace that.
I love this. These 5 pillars are really beautiful. I really, really like those. Thank you.
Sure.
So another thing that I know that you're an expert with are setting boundaries. Can you talk a little bit about, because I think this kind of all ties into boundaries. If you don't love yourself, you're not going to be able to set a boundary. We can't speak up for ourselves. If we don't know who we are, we don't accept. So talk to us a little bit about boundaries, because I know this is a big one for people.
Yeah, it is actually. And it's something that I think, let's start with the fact that boundaries are incredibly misunderstood, especially by women, even modern women, even super high functioning, successful women. People really think about, well, when you think about someone, if you say, wow, she has really great boundaries, what does that image come to your mind? Right? Is it like, wow, amazing, I want to be like that? Or is it like, oh, they're secretly saying she's bitchy?
Right.
They're secretly saying she's masculine.
Yeah.
They're secretly saying she's hard to get along with. She's difficult. She's a diva. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yes.
So the misconceptions, I think we could start with effectively just busting a couple of top myths around boundaries. The first one being that in order to have healthy, solid boundaries in your life, you need to be mean, rejecting, or bitchy. Yeah. Not true. So let's go to what's true about that. Is that think about what not having boundaries actually is. You may like to think that it's just you're nice, you're a pushover, I'm just nice. I'm just nice. Are you? Or are you just afraid? And in being afraid, are you actually being dishonest? Because when we don't speak up and make our preferences known, or we don't negotiate for our needs in our relationships, people can't read your mind. They don't know that you didn't like something if you didn't say you didn't like it. And so it's really not nice to not have boundaries.
Right.
Because you're really being dishonest. So that's one reframe to look at it. And that's to say, listen, when I talk about weak boundaries, I'm not just talking about being a pushover. There's a whole thing that I do before Boundary Boot Camp, which is, the one that I have for next year, which is a course, which is basically all of these boundary archetypes for women in particular. The ice queen, the peacemaker, the pushover, the loner. So when I talk about weak boundaries, I'm not only talking about being a pushover, I'm talking about disordered boundaries, dysfunctional boundaries. And the real definition of that is if your boundaries are not getting you what you want in your life, if the way that you relate to the people in your life, the way you interact, that dynamic, which is basically your boundaries, letting people know, as Brene Brown would say, one of my favorite definitions from someone about personal boundaries, which is basically simply letting the people in your life know what's okay with you and what's not okay with you.
Yeah. It's so simple.
So simple yet hard for most people.
It's so simple. Yeah. It's like we're stuck inside. People feel like they have lockjaw. Sometimes when I say, just tell your so-and-so, this is what you prefer, or this is what you'd like. This is where you want to go to dinner even. Oh, no, I know, because that would make them upset. No. And I did a whole podcast on boundaries versus confrontation. So many people think boundaries are confrontational. And I don't know in your practice, but oftentimes I'll say to somebody, well, what would happen if you set a boundary around that? And their response is so many times, I'm not confrontational. Yeah. That's not a boundary. They're two different things, right?
Exactly. And I like to say that you can create healthy boundaries with ease, grace, and when appropriate, love.
So what if people are afraid to speak up? How can you give us a few ideas on how we can, muster up the courage? Is it courage? What is it? How can people find their inner power in order to speak up for themselves?
Well, it's a process. So let's start with having people who are listening think about a situation in their life, a relationship, where they know that they need to have a conversation, or where they know that boundaries are being crossed. And you can tell because if you feel a constriction when you're around this person, something happens and you feel annoyed by them, you're starting to get angry. Usually it means like a need is not getting met or a boundary has been crossed. And those two things are very similar. In the course that I teach on it, we get real sort of split hairs around what's the difference between like a boundary and a preference.
Yes.
Because there is a difference. What's the difference between a preference and a deal breaker? Right? Those are boundaries that are non-negotiable. So let's just say you guys who are listening, that you ladies, you men, bring to mind a situation where you would like to have a conversation, feel like you need to draw a boundary, but don't know how. If once you have that in your mind, you have to start looking at what is the fear? What are you afraid of? Most of the time, we're afraid to hurt someone's feelings. We're afraid of rejection. We're afraid to be humiliated. We're afraid to make ourselves vulnerable, right? If I tell the truth about this boundary, or I make this simple request, as I would call it, then the person has the power to be like, get lost, you're a jerk, or forget it. Or
be out on me or something.
Yeah. Exactly. It could like get into like a huge conflict of something or whatever your fear is. And then you have to look at the person, and there's something that I always like to give, a little tool I like to give clients, where you can, so much of the time, especially when we have fear and especially around boundaries, we're having like repeating boundary reality, I call it, where it may not really be about this person, the fear that we're having. It may really be more about we're having some kind of a transference. So as a therapist, you know what that means. People who are not a therapist may not know. So I'll just quickly say what it is.
Yeah.
It's basically responding in present time, being fueled by the energy of an old wound of some kind. So it's basically responding today. So let's say you had a boss who you were terrified of, you're afraid to talk to. And then you start really thinking about it and you ask yourself the why. And I give you these 3 questions. It's called the 3 Qs tool, that you ask yourself, I'm so conflicted about this guy. Let me think, let me ask myself and see what else might be going on, right? Is there a parallel process that could be happening here? So the first question is, who does this person remind me of? And the second question is, why is this behavioral dynamic familiar to me? The way that I'm interacting with this person, how I'm trying to avoid them and how I'm afraid of them. How is that familiar? And then the third question is, where have I felt like this before? And so you can start to go, oh, wait, my boss who I wanted to avoid, now I realize he reminds me so much of my father. And so really it's not my 25-year-old self, let's say, being afraid of him. It's my 10-year-old self being terrified of him, which is a different feeling and a different experience. And so sometimes the 3 Qs, they can help you to simply identify like, oh, I'm, now is not then. I need to reassure myself that I'm not 10. My boss is not my dad. And let me see if I can turn down the fear of this conversation and keep myself in the here and now, that I'm having this conversation with my boss and not my father. And sometimes that's enough to give people the courage to do it. But before we even get to the doing, you have to change your mind and reframe. I want you to see drawing boundaries or giving the people in your life information about you that's important, or making your preference known as something that you're actually doing for the health of the relationship. Because in the end, it's when you feel seen, when you allow yourself to be seen, is when you will ultimately feel loved or valued or whatever it is. Because how can anyone authentically love you if you never allow them to authentically know you?
Ooh, that's powerful. That's really powerful right there. I love that, Terri. Those are some fabulous points on boundaries.
Great.
Love those. Thank you.
Yes. And let's talk a teeny bit about language. Can we, Michelle,
Yeah,
quick?
please do.
Because what I was going to say before, and then I got off on some other track, was that what I find in my courses and in my therapy practice and coaching practice is that so much of the time people say, I was right there. I was totally going to say something. And then I just didn't have the words. And so there's a few easy phrases that can start people being able to have the conversation. And one of them is there's two quick strategies I'll give you guys right now. One is that you always start it with a positive, right? You always start it with saying, Bob, let's say it's a coworker you had to do it with, Bob, I really appreciate, how the impact that you've had on our team. And I'd like to make a simple request that you come on time to the team meetings because I speak first. And when you're late, it makes me have to repeat everything I just said. And I feel like it's disruptive. So is it possible that you could commit to or agree to being on time so that I wouldn't have to repeat myself? That's one way.
That's great.
And the other way is just making a simple request. And this is something I believe it's out of the nonviolent communication book. Because I can't remember. I've been using it for so long. I can't actually remember the original source, but I actually didn't create it. I just have used it for like 20 years with my clients and in my life, which is basically just saying, oh, hey, Bob, I'd like to make a simple request that at the Monday morning meeting, can you please come on time? Because I've noticed the last 3 times you've been late. And what that does is it kind of screws up my flow and it makes me have to repeat what I was saying. And I feel like it's disruptive. So can we agree that you'll be on time or whatever?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
You make it normal, like you make it conversational. You don't go in there with the expectation that it's going to be a crap show, right? You go in there with the expectation that there'd be no reason that Bob shouldn't agree to come on time, right? And if Bob knew what a bummer it was to you that he was being late, he might actually go, you know what? I'm so sorry. I have been late and I will be really mindful. Thank you for telling me. Like how many times people go, you know what? I really appreciate you having that hard conversation or you taking the time. I just had a situation with a close friend of mine who I've been friends with for many years. And she went through a period of having a drinking problem. And, 10 years ago or so, she would like text me late at night and I would be like, not making sense. And I stopped drinking when I was in my early 20s. So even then finally I had to be like, dude, stop, do me a favor. Do not text me at night when you've been drinking. Like, please, please don't, because no, thanks. Just please don't. I'm really sorry. I won't do that. And then I saw her for a big occasion and I was with a whole bunch of other people and everyone was drinking except me. And it was just a total crap show. And I was like, okay, note to self, I'll never be doing that again. And then the next time she wanted to see me because she lived in another country for a long time. And this was just recently. We have plans in a few weeks from now. And she was like, I can't wait to see you. I'm getting an Airbnb, this and that. Let's go to a concert together, this and that. And I just said, hey, I need to make a simple request, though, that you do not drink at all when you're with me. And if that's a deal breaker, I totally understand. And she was like, no problem. If I'm with you, that's all I need. But it was, even though I'm a master at boundaries, there was still that trepidation.
Of course. That's that part of our brain that's like 500,000 years old that always thinks, are you going to kick me out of the tribe? Because if you do, you're in big trouble.
Yeah, it's the reptilian brain telling you. That
reptilian brain. Yeah, you're going to die if you set that boundary.
Exactly.
I love how you said that though. And it's not that big of a deal to set a boundary. Like it's not that big of a deal. And how you said it to your friend was beautiful.
And the thing though, Michelle, that is even more important that it's not a big deal, which is true because we need to get past that, is what happens internally when you do it. Because boundaries, just like forgiveness, they're not for the other person.
Exactly.
It's for us to be liberated from resentment prison, basically.
Yes.
And so her response to me gives me data points about the relationship. Like she's a safe person. I don't drink and I don't want to be around anyone who drinks a lot. If you drink normally and you're not an alky, fine. But if it's excessive, it doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And her response saying, I don't need anything but you when we're together. I felt this warmth, this like love, this like, oh, we could really rebuild this friendship to a deeper level because she saw me and respected my request.
I can already hear the comments coming in.
Yep.
You know what I'm going to probably say.
Oh, I do. And I'm happy to hit it. Let's do it.
I can feel them coming.
Yep.
But what am I supposed to do when I set a boundary and that person gets angry with me and they hang the phone up on me and they rage out on me and therefore I don't want to ever set a boundary again.
Yep.
What do you say to these comments that are going to be coming in?
Well, part of it is just you have to get over the idea that you're oh so fragile.
Ooh,
and that your relationships are oh so fragile because they're not and you're not.
That.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that. That just landed on me really well. Yeah, we're not so fragile.
No.
So, and I say this to a lot of my clients. So when they ask me a question like that, I'm like, so what? Right. It doesn't mean you stop setting boundaries.
No, but let's talk about how to respond.
Yes, please.
Part of it is dialing into your own resilience and nurturing that part of yourself. Right? You're not a basket case. You're not a mess. You're not a disaster. Don't use these words to describe yourself, whether it comes to love or being on time or handling money. Just don't. Because you set yourself up energetically and with that vibration, you're constantly, it's basically a prayer for the opposite of what you want. So let's just tap into the resilience of the human spirit and of who you are and of your relationships. Listen, if your relationship falls apart because you can stay lovingly attached to someone while you draw a boundary. And if you do, and that person loses their mind, okay, that's a data point for you to consider. Now, people don't like us to change. And this is also a part of human nature. So I think that what we want to think about is understanding you're going to get pushback.
Yeah.
You're going to change, and it threatens the other people who love you, who you love. And they'll be like, oh, I didn't mean it. So are you offended? You're saying I did something wrong.
Right.
I don't get it. They'll be defensive. Right. And so how do we disarm or interact with someone who's being defensive? So you say, I'd like to make a simple request that you not be late. Let's just go back to Bob for the meeting. And Bob says, well, I'm commuting from far away because the house I bought is 2 hours out, blah, blah, blah. Whatever Bob is saying. P.S. Bob's bullshit has nothing to do with you. So let's just say that. Like Bob buying a house 2 hours away is not your problem. You know what? Bob's job is to be to the meeting on time, just like everybody else. So it's having those professional boundaries of not taking on. When you're a codependent, you go, oh, that must be terrible. When you're acting codependently at work. And when not, you can say, I can feel for you, Bob, but that's actually not my side of the street,
Yeah.
Like I get myself here. You don't know where I'm coming from, but I still managed to get here by 5 minutes to 9. So if they get defensive, you can say, hey, all I'm asking is that you do whatever it is that you need to do to be here on time. I can't believe you're being mean. I can't believe how critical you are. Hey, Bob, I'm actually just making a simple request. I'm not making you wrong. I'm not saying anything about your character. I'm making a simple request so that when I'm talking in the meeting, it doesn't get disrupted. That's all I'm doing. So can I go back to the simple request? You know what I mean? So with a business thing, that's one way to handle it. With a romantic thing, you have to just stand your ground, or with a sibling thing or a family thing. The person will pull out all the stops usually. Dr. Harriet Lerner, who's one of my heroes, she wrote The Dance of Anger, The Dance of Intimacy, The Dance of Deception. I mean, she is a relationship expert of experts. Oh my God, her work is so brilliant. If you guys listening don't know her work, you might want to read it. But anyway, she talks about, I have so many quotes, but basically talking about defensiveness is the arch enemy of listening.
Ooh. Wow.
And it is. And it's an important thing for those listening and for all of us to be mindful. And it's such a low vibration. Being defensive is very like a low vibration. Like suddenly you become 5.
Yes.
But wait, it's not me. I didn't do something wrong. It's not my fault. It's like you've got to be able to listen with a desire, if someone is bringing a complaint to you, to go, okay, I'm going to let them finish everything they say. I'm not going to cut them off. I'm not going to jump in. Hopefully there'll be time for me to ask questions so I can really understand what they're saying. But anyway, back to what do you do if the people who you're drawing a boundary with become defensive? Is you can say, it seems like I've upset you, which was not my intention. I'm just making a simple request that you don't call me after 10 p.m. because I'm going to bed earlier these days. Let's just say that was the thing, you know?
Yeah.
And the person's like, oh, I can't believe you're limiting when I can call you. Sometimes I want to talk to you at 11, you know? You could say, okay, well, you know what? That actually is my boundary and I'm going to ask you to respect it because, you know, physically I need more sleep, whatever. And the person can be mad. The real thing is there's almost always this rebound desire when you're first learning to draw boundaries to like take the boundary back.
Like, it's okay. I guess you can come and drink around me and it's okay. Yep.
And so I always, in the boundary boot camp, which is one of the courses I teach, I always have people like, you have to at least wait 24 to 48 hours, allowing it to sink in for you so that you can see what is the bounce back for you. What is the fear mind telling you you're going to get kicked out of the tribe because of it? And is it a real regret? Did you handle it badly? Well, you can handle it in 24 hours. And I'd say 99% of the time, people go, no, actually, I still feel the same. That's still the boundary I wanted to draw. It's still an appropriate boundary, or it's an appropriate preference to share. But the real thing is you got to change your mind about it and just not flip out if the person pushes back.
That is brilliant. I like the wait time. It's like the 24 to 48 hour wait. It's like, hold on, let's let it sink in.
Yep.
Do you really want to come back on that boundary or do you want to stand firm? The other thing I want to share is that I love, again, I just want to reiterate how you set the boundary and how if someone has pushback, what I noticed for my listeners, I just want to share this. You stayed in what I would call your adult chair, which means you're staying in the present moment.
Yep.
You're not making up excuses and you're speaking. This is the key, with fact and truth.
Yep.
Please don't do that. And this is why I'm saying this, because I go to bed at this hour and I don't want you to do this. And this is why you were not emotional. You didn't say anything like, oh, well, hold on. Well, wait a minute. And you stayed solid in who you are, which is key. Absolutely key.
Yes. But you know, Michelle, it requires this shift.
Yes.
In mindset where you really get. Deepak Chopra said to me many years ago, because I've studied with him quite extensively over the years. He was like, I can't even do his accent, but I want to try. Daddy,
let's hear it.
Daddy, remember, you never have to convince anyone of anything.
Ooh.
And it was like, I don't even know what year it was, but it changed my life because I would never have entered my mind how much of my time I spent covertly seeking approval from people, convincing them that the choices I was making were the right ones, whether it was in a relationship or my career or whatever I was doing. And then I realized, oh my God, I don't have to convince anyone of crap. I'm the only person who's living it, right?
Yes.
You're the only person who's living it. These people listening are the only people living it.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to defend your boundary.
No.
We just want people to respect it. And yes, I will give context in some relationships, right? I want my husband to understand why I'm asking for what I'm asking for. Relationships where I really care about the people where it's appropriate. I do like to start with something positive and say, you know, that I appreciate. And with my husband, I really don't need to do that. We've been married 20 years and have a great relationship. Like, he gets it. If I could just make the friggin' request, he doesn't care.
Yeah.
But, you know, even with friends who I feel like they're a little sensitive, I'll say, I really love that we, you know, are quarterly dinners, but I have a simple request that I get to choose where we go this time, because the last 4 times we've met in Brooklyn, but that's a schlep for me and not for you. So can I choose the restaurant this time?
I love that. I have a simple request.
Yeah, me too.
Oh my God, that's beautiful. When we are on this path of growth, of transformation, of loving the self, we are changing on the inside. And sometimes our friends are not a match for us anymore. And learning how to set a boundary is something that we do when we're really wanting to, what do we want to call it? Self-improvement, self-love, all of this.
No, it's
right?
actually, it's self-communication and self-protect.
Yeah,
it's fully self-expressed when you draw a boundary,
But sometimes people that we are friends with become not a match for us anymore. So when we start doing things like setting boundaries and they're getting angry and angry and angry with us, I think it's time then to re-examine that relationship. Maybe it's over. Maybe we're not a match anymore.
I totally agree. But I think that truthfully, Michelle, I find that there are so many stops. There's such a gradation of we're besties and we're no longer friends, right?
Yeah. Totally. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
There's this way place. And most women, it's so funny. I actually created this mini course, which is called like the Friendship Breakthrough or Breakup Guide, Learn to Discern.
Oh, that's good.
And it's basically about this exact thing, because I cannot tell you I'm going to say thousands of women at this point in my speaking career and wherever have brought up to me difficulty in female friendships. Like a lot of them are not having a love thing. They're having a friendship thing where they're in some crazy codependent relationship with someone. The other person needs to know everything that they're doing. And whatever their problem is, they're like, I really need you to help me break up with them.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, can we draw a boundary first? Can we have a conversation first before we have them offed? Like, and they don't feel like they can. So therefore their mind is saying the only solution is ending the friendship.
Yeah. Being done with it.
Like there's 1,000 things to do before that. And hey, if you know you're done, if the person's truly toxic, sure, I'm not against ending the friendship.
Yeah.
But if there's value, if you love this person somewhere down deep, it's about you becoming ballsy enough to have the real conversations in your life. It can't all be rainbows and unicorns. That isn't real life.
So true.
If you want deep relationships, right?
Right.
We can't bypass the conflict and have real intimacy, because those two things are mutually exclusive,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So true. And having an authentic life and authentic relationships within my life. This is what has to happen.
Yep.
This is what has to happen.
Agreed.
Wow. Terri, this was awesome. Thank you. This was so good. This is great information. Tell us first of all, I know you have a few things that are coming up, or a big thing actually, but how can people find you?
Okay. My website is terricole.com. That's TERRICOLE.com. And I'm really active on Instagram, which is at Terri Cole. And then I have, for the women in the crew, I have a Facebook group that is called Real Love Revolution with Terri Cole. And it's just for women, where there's a lot of free weekly stuff, and I do Q&As and all kinds of stuff. It's fun. So that's where people can find me mainly. And I'm on Pinterest. I'm everywhere. Pinterest and Twitter. Same. Just look for my name. And then do you want to talk about what's coming up?
Yes, I'd love to hear. Please share.
I'm so excited. So in January, which is now, so it starts on January 14th. I'm doing a 10-day More Love meditation experience. So I'm a meditation teacher, and I have a lot of meditation CDs out, and backed by popular demand, because I did this a couple of years ago, but I actually changed it. And so it's every day. You sign up for this, and every day you commit to doing between a 5 to 10 minute meditation. And then we all meet in the Facebook group, and the Facebook group itself is just for women, but other, men and women can actually sign up for the experience itself. We're not calling it a challenge, because wow, isn't life challenging enough, people? I need another challenge, like I need a hot poker stuck in my eye. So we will not be having any more challenges.
So true.
But what you get is this experience of starting the year attracting more love into your life. And this is for people who are in relationships and people who are single. So you may be in a relationship seeking to up-level the love, the joy, the happiness in that relationship. You may be single, looking to be found by your beloved, let's say. And so this is all about love, the entire experience. And then on the last day, we move into the real Love Live experience, where I'm going to be teaching tools and strategies on whether, if you're in a relationship, how to make that better, or know if maybe it's time to get out of the relationship. And if you're single, it's really how to become a magnet for love in 2019.
Oh my
So
gosh.
that's totally free. And you have a link for people to sign up.
Yes, it's terricole.com/TAC, which stands for The Adult Chair. So anyone on this podcast that wants to sign up, go to terricole.com/TAC, TAC. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that it bumps right up into Valentine's month.
Yes, it does. And actually, it leads right into my Real Love Revolution course, which starts February 6th.
Oh, perfect.
So it's a perfect time of year for anyone who wants to sort of up their love game. And the More Love meditation experience is completely free.
Oh, how cool. Thank you. You have some great, great offerings. So everybody needs to go check her out, please, Terri Cole. This has been fabulous, really. Like, I love that we're kicking off the year with you.
Me too, Michelle. We could have talked for another 12 hours, but we'll just do it again, and then you'll come on my show and we'll just keep it going.
We definitely do need to do that. That'd be great. So thanks again. And Terri, we're going to talk in a minute about our Audible book, because you have a fabulous book by Deepak Chopra. But I just want to let everybody know that today's podcast is sponsored in part by Audible. So get your free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/The Adult Chair. So Terri, tell us about this book. It's Creating Affluence, The A to Z Steps to a Richer Life by Deepak Chopra. Tell us just a little bit about that book, if you could.
Sure. I love it. I carry it in my pocketbook or my purse, whatever you call it. Or if you're my niece, you would call it my pocket purse. She just decided to call it both.
Oh, that's cute.
It's like a reference guide it's like a daily thing. And I love it because it's just one page. It's super simple. How I do it is I just open it up to any page. It's almost sort of like pulling a card from a card deck. Mm-hmm. And it's basically all about creating abundance and affluence in your life. And affluence doesn't necessarily mean only money, right? Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with money. It means that too, for sure. But it's really about, he just reminds me so easily when I read that of things that I can be mindful of throughout that day. I've just found it to be an amazing tool of just a little like wisdom bomb, basically, in the morning, that then I go on and all day I'm aware of whatever it is. One of my favorites there, in that book is E is for exulting in the successes of those who would consider you their enemy, and they will become your greatest supporter. Oh,
wow. Deep stuff. Deep from Deepak.
Yeah, it's all deep from Deepak. My God, if you can hold
on. Wow. I love that. So whether you want to listen to it on Audible or buy the book, it sounds like it's a really, really great book to have.
I love Audible, by the way. I'm not kidding.
No,
and I'm not sponsored by them. I'm obsessed. My husband and I have our own because we need too many points. We can't share an Audible account.
I'm a little bit of an Audible junkie myself.
Oh, it's the best.
Especially when you have the extra points up there. It's like, I get more books. So I love it. Thank you. So anyone that wants that book, don't forget, go to audibletrial.com/The Adult Chair. Terri Cole, again, we have to do this again. This was awesome. So thank you for being on our show today.
Thank you for having me, Michelle. It was so much fun.
Yay. And everybody, as you know, I'm Michelle Chalfant. I'll see you seated right here next week, firmly in the adult chair. And Happy New Year. And I'll see you next week.